in order to elect a root port from a multiple equal cost. So we are using this diagram. So for this example, for switch 1 has been elected as a root bridge. In order to go to switch 1, switch 2 can go through trunk 2 and trunk 3 or trunk 4 and trunk 1 with the same cost. Okay, it must go through here will be 38. If you go through here also 38. So it cannot decide based on the cost. So now they must choose the path through a switch with a lower bridge ID. So compared to switch 3 and switch 4, which one has a lower bridge ID? So the bridge ID start with the priority value. So you can see switch 3 and switch 4 use the same priority value, but their MAC address for switch 3 is a 5555, but switch 4 is a 1111. So you can see here 1111 is lower than 555. So switch 2, we put F0/2 as a root port. So for switch 4, it's easy. F0/T as a root port. So F0/1 on switch 1 will be designated port, or all other port on switch 1 will become a designated port. But F01 on switch 4 here, because S2 has been elect F01 as a root port, so at the end of this segment we become a designated port. But for a connection between switch 2 and switch 3, there is no root port in this connection. So they will use the same rule before. Which switch has the lower bridge ID? So 555 is lower than AAA. AAAA. So port connected to switch 3 become a designated port, and port connected to switch 2 become a alternate port. So what you have learned today, first we select root bridge based on bridge ID. The lowest one become root bridge, and then we need to select a root port. For from a switch, they need to calculate the cost. With the lowest cost, we can a root port. From switch 3, in order to go switch 1, they can go through switch 2 and switch 4, but we get a higher cost. So the other port cannot become a root port. And then we select a designated port. How to select designated port? All port on the root bridge become a designated port. Okay, all link they have a root port on the other end become a designated port. But when we have a segment, a link that doesn't have a root port, we select a switch with a lower bridge ID with a designated port. So the other end become a alternate port. But there is also another situation when we have a same cost and also same bridge ID. So let's say for this example, so there is a situation that we create a loop. So switch 1 has been elected as a root bridge because they have a lower bridge ID to 24,000. Switch 4 is a 32,000. Okay. So now switch 4, in order to select a root port, either F06 or F05. So they take a look the bridge ID. So a connection from F06 go to switch 1, which is this bridge ID. Okay, a connection from F05 also go to the same S1. So they have the same bridge ID. Okay, the cost also same for Ethernet. So they cannot choose based on bridge ID or cost. So now they will choose based on a port priority. Okay, default all these fast Ethernet have the port priority of 1 to 8. Also same, but you can change if you like to choose one. Give a command to change. But if there is a same, so how they can choose the port in order to become a root port? So now they are look at the port ID. So port ID not port ID of switch 4, even though we are still struggling on switch 4 in order to decide which one become a root port, but we need to take a look their sender ID. So for F06, the sender ID is a F01. For F06, the sender ID is a F02. So 1 and 2, which one is a lower? So bridge ID, the port ID is a the number of the port. So F01 is a lower. So a connection to F01 will become a root port. Even though F06 have a higher ID compared to F05, but we are not take a look at the ID of their own. We must take a look at the ID of the sender, which is our S1. So S1 has a lower ID for F01. So F01 connected to F06. Now F06 become a root port. And then the rest will be follow the same. Okay. So any question? Are you understand about the port ID? It's not looking at the switch 4. We look at the other switch that connected to switch 4. So F01 has a lower ID. Of course, F01 is the lowest ID compared to 02, 03 and so on. Okay. So that's all how they choose a bridge, root port, designated port and alternate port. So it can be from a root bridge, we choose from the lower bridge ID, root port from the lower cost, and then designated port based on rule. Okay, when there is a root port, so the other end must be a designated port. But there is a situation where there is no root port. So a segment where there is no root port actually a segment where a loop can occur. So we need to block them. So we are only pick one as a designated port and one port will be a blocking port. When one port will be a blocking port, so the link will become unusable.